This is a video journal response to 4.2, the Imperial Crisis and Resistance to Britain. Before I speak about the reasons the new social classes and class divisions were a reason for the war, I must go back to the original, the landing, where America began. There were no real social classes at that time. Everybody was pretty equal. There were people that had more wealth than others, but it was all equal because he was just as likely to die as that person, so his wealth didn't really matter. But then, as time went on, they became more wealthy. They became more prosperous, and they started to get money, and a social class started to develop, where there was a poor, a middle class, and a wealthy. And then Britain started to notice that, and one must remember that Britain kind of held them together, almost in a way, because the different colonies were very different in their ideologies and what they expected, so eventually probably a civil war would have broken out much earlier than it did. But Britain kind of being that hammer that was just hammering down everybody, kind of unified them in a way, because it's kind of like with the Greeks, with the Persians. They were like sitting there quarreling with each other and fighting and killing each other. But then the Persians came in and they're like, oh, geez, he's worse than you and you and you. So they kind of unified and they went out and they kicked those people out, the Persians out. It's much the same idea. So then Britain came in and they started to basically unravel the whole social class and class divisions that were there, which were primarily European, like almost 100% at that time. And basically made it so there was no real middle class or wealthy. There was just everybody was pretty much poor. There were some elitists that were, working in government that was kind of mungling along. But they made laws where, like, a colonist could not make buttons, horseshoes, or a hobnail to prevent, basically, independence from Britain. So they could hike up the taxes and stuff on whatever they wanted because America was dependent on Britain for what they wanted. So that was kind of weak for them. And then it got to a point where less than half of the people less than 48.7% of the colonies were just English. 20% were African, so this was kind of the beginning of slavery, and then there was Scotch, Irish, German, Scottish, Dutch, French, Swedish, and other. And then if you probably look at the English, there were probably people that were like, part German, and there really wasn't. The ties to Britain were very weakened. They weren't there anymore. So there was no cultural reason to let them just pound on you anymore. So that kind of created a strain and want to secede from Britain and develop and seek independence. So that's what they did, obviously, during the Revolutionary War. So they seceded, and that victory against the British which was like unheard of and was not expected to happen, kind of created like a patriotic power that kept everybody together for a very long time, but eventually that did fall apart, and the South and the North kind of butted heads, and Civil War started. But, that was kind of expected eventually, once that power faded. So that's why the cultural, social, and class divisions are why the Revolutionary War started, and not colony paranoia and bad temperament, government and taxation disputes, and new colonial attitudes of self-importance and growing independent identities. Although that all of them did affect how the Revolutionary War started. But always race and social classes always are what powers revolutions almost always, because that's just how we are. We're a racially independent people.